Welcome to the Faith and Family Ministry Leader Podcast, thoughtful conversations for leaders navigating family ministry in the local church today. And today, we have the privilege of talking about what does it mean to raise up men, grandfathers, fathers, husbands, sons, brothers, single men, all of the above. We are navigating an interesting moment in time and in culture for what does discipleship look like for the men. And I have a unique guest list with me here today. We got Pastor Ryan, a senior pastor, Pastor Ronnie, a senior pastor, and W.A. Mills, the National Men's Director for Discipleship Ministries for the IPHC. So, guys, I want to just kind of open up with, what does it look like to raise up men, to disciple men in the local church today who love Jesus, who are passionate about His Word, and have a desire to see the church and the Word and all of those things flourish in our faith? What does that look like right now? W, I want to start with you, as this is a unique role that you are getting to oversee for a denomination. What are you seeing that look like today?
Well, for me, answering that question goes back to a definition that I heard for authentic masculinity many years ago from Robert M. Lewis in his classic work, The Quest for Authentic Manhood. He said, a real man rejects passivity, accepts responsibility, leads courageously, and expects the greater reward, God's reward. Or another way of saying that is he invests eternally.
Wow.
And I think that definition is huge. I haven't seen one to improve upon that yet. And because there is such an assault on biblical masculinity and such confusion about what constitutes manhood, to me, that's the place we began, defining what is a man. And so I have, for almost 6 years now in this role, done my best to come alongside of pastors, having pastored 33 years myself, to help pastors get a handle on that working definition so they in turn could convey that to the men that they're pastoring and leading. A real man rejects passivity, accepts responsibility, leads courageously, and invests eternally.
So good. Ronnie, Ryan, I mean, senior pastors, you guys are seeing this play out in your church. What does it look like to, and not just obviously the men who are, in your services, but the boys who are coming into your ministry, your children's ministry, your student ministry, raising up men to be followers of Jesus. How is this playing out for you guys?
Well, I mean, they have to know that they're not alone in this. The challenges are real, and they need to know that, there is a way forward, there's a way up, and God has that for them. So they don't need to be discouraged by the challenges they do face, but know that God has a way forward for them in an adverse culture. They're not isolated. They're not alone. And God's got a way forward for them.
Why do you feel it's like the natural bent for men to feel that way right now? Do we feel like this is this like a prior generation thing, or is it maybe a gender kind of like generalization thing of like, oh, figure it out on your own, do it on your own, or do you believe there's another reason why men feel like by themselves and they're having to figure this out on their own right now? Have you seen maybe some of the why of that in your church?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's more of a product of this age or if it's just something that is part of the natural makeup of masculinity. But, nevertheless, it is an issue. It's the one that is in front of us, has to be engaged. Otherwise, there won't be the progress made that's needing to be made in those areas.
Yeah.
They won't become who they need to be unless they're informed that there is truly a way forward and a way upward.
Yeah. Pastor Ryan?
I think men sometimes have difficulty forming meaningful relationships of intimacy with other men. And I think that's because of everything our culture says about what masculinity is, about the role of the man in the house and home, and needing to fulfill whatever those cultural ideas are I think makes it really, really difficult for men to just have friends. I mean, never mind spiritual relationships.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think that makes it a real challenge in the area of discipleship because they're already isolated, and all that's exacerbated by contemporary technology and the way things go with all of that. So I think all of that plays into the question.
And Tim, I think some of the images from years past, like the Lone Ranger,
Yeah.
Rambo. So men often have this idea that they have to go it alone. And men typically aren't inclined, as Pastor Ryan said, to open up and share. I mean, even with their wife, they come home at the end of the day and, how was your day? Fine. Who did you talk to? Oh, my coworkers.
Yeah.
And so they're not inclined to give any detailed explanation about where they are. They're guarded, and so oftentimes they suffer alone in isolation. How can we come alongside of them and help them? And that's where, I suggest, and it's not original with me, but every man needs 3 men in his life. He needs an older man, a Paul. He needs a peer mentor like a Barnabas, a son of encouragement. And he needs a younger man, a Timothy, that he's pouring his life into.
Yeah.
And it's out of that mentoring relationship of giving and receiving that a man realizes, hey, I really am not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems to be the anthem of the age that independence is the destination of discipleship for a man, right? Like the more you grow, the more independent you should be, and the more you should be able to be self-sufficient, whether that be financially, physically, and vocationally. It's the anthem to go, okay, do this on your own. And yet, we look at the words of Jesus in John 15, and he goes, no. I didn't create you for independence. I created you to be dependent. I'm the vine. You are the branch.
Yes.
You have no source of life apart from me. Why is this so important? Why is it so important so we can talk about men leaning in the church. And we're not just talking about husbands and fathers. We're talking about all men, the single men in our church. We're talking about grandfathers, the spiritual fathers, and the sages in our midst. We're talking about the young men calling up boys into what does it mean to live into the purposeful creation of our Creator. And why is it so important for us to raise them up into discipleship? Why do we have to emphasize this? Like, why is this so imperative that we as the church don't neglect, but we lean into calling forward men to follow Jesus? What's the cost here?
Take it away, Pastor.
Okay, yeah. I think we all have a lot of things to say about that. So I think it's just men have a natural leadership role, and that's not necessarily accepted or celebrated in the way that masculinity is viewed. Certainly, there's the whole issue of toxic masculinity, which can be a real thing, and that can be distorted and all of that.
Absolutely.
But men have I think a God-given responsibility and role in the family to lead. And, of course, women have a role to lead in their capacities as well and in their giftings as well. But I think for men to abdicate that responsibility, and which I see a lot in local ministry, just sort of the men going, okay, I'm going to lead with regard to making sure my kid's good at sports, or making sure they're rough and tumble, they can handle those things. And I'm going to let my wife lead with the more emotional things. And we
the
kind
nurturing and caregiving.
Yeah, we kind of put that stuff, we kind of relegate that to the women and the other to the men. And I just think that men just have a role across the spectrum and not just in one sort of area of leadership. And I just think that if we abdicate that responsibility, it's to the neglect of the home and the church.
So good.
Hence the fatherless epidemic that we see across the world.
Yeah.
And the need to call men not just to father their own biological children, but the idea that every man should be a spiritual father as well. I see that as a huge challenge. So the answering why, I mean, biblical masculinity being under assault, fatherlessness being such an epidemic, those are among some of the reasons why I think it's so imperative that we call forth men, just like David, when he was on his deathbed, did with his son Solomon, 1 Kings 2:2, take courage and be a man. But Ronnie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's an issue means it's an issue that needs to be addressed. The fact that we're talking about it means it's an apparent issue. And certainly what Pastor Ryan said about the kind of passive abdication of some of our responsibilities, it has long-term consequences that cannot be ignored, and in fact shouldn't be ignored. They should be embraced. What are the challenges? Why are some men minded that they ought to leave the softer matters, the matters of emotion and dealing with matters of maybe traditionally non-masculine matters to the wife, to the mother? It's just, it doesn't work out well in the end. They need to see strength performing under pressure. They don't need to see dad clock out emotionally. When the things get tense, that's when he needs to stand up and accept the responsibility and engage, knowing that there's a greater reward on the other side of that.
And that's the positive, Tim. In answering the why, we can focus on the negatives, but the positive is that when men are engaged, everything changes. It changes in that man's life. It changes in his marriage.
Everything
it changes
flourishes.
In the family, in the home. It changes in the church. In fact, there's one stat out there that says when a man is the first to be assimilated into a local church, 93% of the time his family's going to follow. He has that kind of influence over the household, over the family.
Carries a unique way. And I think it is right and it's biblical to say the family suffers both when men abdicate their role and they step down, and when women abdicate their role. Both created in the image of God, both created to use Paul's language in the New Testament as a body, to be parts of the body so that the body can flourish. And in the same way, if a woman's to abdicate her role in any role of the family, as the mother, as the wife, as a daughter, as a sister, we abdicate our roles, the family suffers. The same as what we see with fathers, with husbands, with sons, with singles in the family. This reality of when the role is abdicated, things suffer, and that translates first within the family, and then it replicates itself out into the local church. It replicates itself out into the community, and forward. As senior pastors, as a national director for men's ministry, I just kind of want to name what are some of the things that you guys are seeing specifically, challenges that you're seeing men face, and that is kind of like a mountain standing in the way of discipleship or the man's ability to flourish, whether it's just in their personal faith, in the local church. What are you seeing as unique challenges for men right now? Pastor Ronnie, let's start with you.
Okay. Challenges, I mean, there's a lot of them. Marriage, that's a challenge for men. How to engage meaningfully and adequately with your wife. If you have that right, everything else really does flourish. If that's wrong, and of course that's speaking of married men, but financial matters. It's the whole man, I should say. It's every aspect of his life that is a challenge in this world where men really are maybe not supported the way that they have been in the past, where their role was kind of implicitly appreciated. Even those that weren't even that great at being were still respected, right? Whereas today, even those that are doing well, they might even sometimes suffer to get the respect they feel they deserve. So in the midst of even doing well, sometimes these men are found to still come up short in situations. It could be disheartening. So, it's not just a challenge that the man needs to perform better, but he's, in my estimation, operating in a largely adverse environment that is new.
I think the identity of a whole generation is at stake. because you have a redefinition or a limitation of the biblical definition of what masculinity is. And I think, honestly, that plays into a lot of the gender and identity issues that we see just plaguing society right now. Because there's such a limitation on what it really means to be a man. If you know any other experience, then, you must have a different identity. So you have to kind of exchange your whole idea of what even that can be for some other reality. And I think that I think is a unique challenge of our particular age, being able to embrace the biblical definition of manhood, of masculinity, which is in itself a bit of a challenge because there's no verse and chapter and verse that tells us this is what a man is, point A, B, and C, right? So we really just get these biblical examples, and some of those are limited in history and social context, so we can't always straight on apply everything that David did to the 21st century. I mean, we're not fighting in the same way that David fought. Maybe we are if we're in the military or something, but I think just figuring out what that identity can be based on the biblical principles of godly character and embodying that in the 21st century. I think that is a unique challenge.
Yeah. W.A.?
Well, I asked that very question that you asked of a young father. He's in his mid-40s. He has teenagers in the home. And I said, what are challenges that you're facing? And he sent it to me in an email. And some of that we've already covered, but he gave me a bullet list.
Okay.
Challenges of raising children today, marriage advice, Ronnie talked about that, boundaries and relationships, screens and teens, that's what he called it, screens and teens, money management, healthy living, diet, exercise, even fasting as a spiritual discipline, mentorship and accountability, pornography and sexual addiction, social media, and spiritual warfare. That was this particular man's list. That's a pretty long list there.
Yeah.
Would keep us all busy if we set out to address those issues.
Yeah.
And we must.
Yeah.
We must.
Yeah. It's a great list, extensive and gives us a broad spectrum of going, okay, this is what we're seeing in the local church. We know that if there would be ever a scheme or attack or an agenda from the enemy to stifle the ability for God's body to flourish, attacking both the man and the woman and their ability to function in who God has created them to be would be the effective agenda to go after. As kind of like a closing commission here, in the roles that the Lord has placed you guys in to steward and help shepherd and oversee, what's giving you hope right now? What's giving you hope as you're looking out and you're seeing at the landscape? I think we can sit and we can talk about these things, and there can be 1,000 things that are discouraging or going, all right, this is what's going on. But at the end of the day, Christ raised from the dead, right? Like he's coming again in glory to judge the living and the dead. And God has given us this moment to stand and to bear witness to the good news of Jesus Christ. What hope are you seeing from men that give life?
One of the things that's really interesting to me is the whole search for heroes. Like, we're desperate for heroes. This is why Avengers, Marvel, the Marvel Universe, all that stuff is just so incredibly popular. With, like, when I was a kid, the very idea of 40, 50-year-old men sitting in the theater watching Spider-Man would have been laughable, right? This was something that kids got into, not grown men.
Yeah.
But grown men are wearing Captain America t-shirts and Superman. I mean, just we're into it because I think our culture is desperate for heroes. But I also think we're disenfranchised with that because we keep looking for them in the wrong places. And the problem is that when we look for them in the wrong places, we get disappointed. But the beauty and the hope of that is that hunger is there.
Yeah.
And when we search, when people genuinely search, I think the Holy Spirit will get involved in that process and draw people. There's a genuine, legitimate hunger. They're kind of coming to the end. It feels like people are coming to the end of that mythology. And it doesn't pay off like they hoped and dreamed it would.
Yeah.
And now they're going, okay, well, So
now what?
So now what? Where's the role model? What can we value? I think they're tired of canceling everything and tired of criticizing everything and tired of just tearing all the institutions down. So many people that I see are at that place and they're just going, okay, where can I put my feet? And what a tremendous answer we have in the gospel.
Praise
Like
God.
that's solid ground to put people's feet on. So I think that's tremendous hope for the church.
Love it. Ronnie?
Yeah, I was going to say the pendulum effect is real. If you go in that direction far enough, people are going to have a strong response against it. So just from a very natural viewpoint, you can only cancel so many things before there's nothing left.
Yeah.
And then you got to build something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You can only do so much deconstruction to when reconstruction
There you
starts
go.
taking place. WA?
For me, the hope that I see is an increase in participation across the spectrum intergenerationally of younger men with middle-aged men and older men. When I first started in this role, a lot of the events that I attended and spoke at were largely men my age and older. But in the last 18 months, I have seen an uptick of men your age showing up at these events, and even teenage boys and preteen boys who are saying, would you send me information? Would you send me resources?
Yeah.
So I'm encouraged by that. I'm also encouraged when I see a cooperative spirit among the ethnic groups of men, where I'm seeing not just Anglo men. It was older Anglo men. Now it's Hispanic and Anglo men and Black brothers that are there, and so that's what gives me hope and fuels my passion to equip men to make disciples of other men. 2 Timothy 2:2.
Such a good conversation. It is the invitation for us as ministry leaders to be able to look at the people that God has put in front of us and help steward and cultivate and work the ground by which God has called us to work. And so the reality of the need for us to raise up boys, men, fathers, spiritual brothers, spiritual aunts, uncles, grandparents, sages in our ministry is not something we can neglect or overlook. It's a necessity for the work that God has called us to. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this today. If you are looking for some more resources on these ministry leader conversations, you can go ahead and check out some of the other podcasts that we have done, or you can go ahead and see the further resources that we have at the-iff.com. Have a wonderful day. Grace, mercy, peace be with you.